Hello legends, and welcome to part 3 of my real-time API voice agent build. In this video, we're going to be going over how to automate any process for your real-time AI voice agent using make.com as the backend. So I'm really pushing the make.com backend specifically because it connects up to 2,000 apps. It's actually insane how many apps it plugs into, but it plugs into so many of the apps that you're most likely going to be using in a very super simple drag and drop interface. Now, in my recent videos, I've been pushing this survey a lot, and I've been getting loads of people responding, saying that they want to learn from my YouTube videos. And one of my first questions is, what is your skill level at AI automation? And actually, a lot of people sit in between the intermediate and the beginner level, which just shows me that a lot of my audience is probably still very new to coding, or at least more comfortable with low code, no code tools. And just by looking at make.com, you can see that this is like super visual. It's very easy to identify what is going on in specific steps. So this is a webhook, this is a ChatGPT step, this is a Google Sheets step. So it's very visual and it's very beginner friendly. And even for myself, I've taught myself how to code and how to use AI to code pretty much from scratch across the last 1.5 years. And I'm very comfortable with writing code and using AI to build out web apps and all that kind of stuff. But I still default to using make.com as the backend because it's just so simple and it's very visual and it's very easy to work with. So going through all the reasons why I think that make.com is a great backend. So firstly, it plugs into over 2,000 apps. So a lot of people in my previous video have been saying, hey, can you plug this into a CRM? Can you plug this into a Google Calendar to make bookings? And on the make.com integrations page, you can see over here that Make has over 2,000 apps in their database. So if you want to plug into a CRM, if you want to plug into a Google Calendar, you can see already here, they've got a Google Calendar integration. If we dig into this and scroll down a little bit, these are all the events that you can use off the bat by using the Google Calendar module. And right over here, we have create an event, delete an event. So you're already one step closer to actually integrating your booking system with your Google Calendar. Back on the main integrations page, let's just type in a few CRMs and see if they have modules. So we already see HubSpot over here, but let's type in something like Asana, which we have over here. Let's type in Zendesk, and we've got multiple for Zendesk. Let's go Gorgeous, which is another customer service one. We've got Go High Level, which is just an absolutely amazing CRM as well. So already you can see that connecting to all your different software tools is very easy with make.com. And if you wanted to plug into your CRM and calendar, you most likely already have a module to do that with as well. Now, the final reason why I like make.com is that it manages API updates. So some of these tools are made by make.com and some are made by the community. Like over here, we saw Gorgeous and it was a community tag underneath. This means that make.com didn't make this, but rather a third-party developer made this. Now, it's in the best interest of these third-party developers and make.com themselves to keep their connections up to date. So if any of these software tools ever updates any of their API documentation or how the API works, then these guys will be ahead of the game and make sure to update their modules as well. So you can be sure that whenever you make a scenario in make.com, that it's always going to be fresh and valid. Now, the final reason that I actually didn't list here, but this is more of a reason of how I set up my own build, is the fact that I have all of my automations going from my real-time API voice agent directly into this webhook. And then from here, I have multiple routes to complete multiple actions. So right now I've got route 1, route 2, route 3, and route 4. And to briefly discuss some of these routes, if you remember from my last video, in route 1, I actually obtain the user's information before they complete the call request, so that when I greet them, I actually have their name and what their last service was about. For route number 2, I send a transcript of the entire conversation into a Google Sheets so I can maintain a history of all the calls. For route 3 over here, I've got my RAG using the OpenAI Assistance API, so I can do question and answers using these modules over here. And finally, route number 4 is to book a tow for my fictional Bart's Automotive store. So as you can see, it's super easy to just build this out and add another route over here. And all you need to do is just hit the exact same webhook that you initially came to, change the route to point to this new route, and then build out your modules by searching them up by name. So let me just finish off going through the sheet before we get into make.com and I run through all the modules that I have. So a lot of people have asked me and emailed me about giving them the blueprint. So I'm gonna make the blueprint available on my Gumroad. It's gonna be free, totally free. I think you just need to put an email into Gumroad to actually get this blueprint. But yes, it's free. Otherwise, if you use it and you're finding value from it, please donate, consider donating. So I've got some asks for you guys. If you're watching this and you haven't subscribed to my page, please subscribe. If you're enjoying these videos, if you wanna see other content explained in the exact same way as this, also feel free to comment that below and just say, hey Bart, can you make a follow-up on this? Or can you do a deep dive into another topic of your choice? And next, if you have a few minutes spare, I hope that you can fill out the survey that I left in my description of this video. And it's the exact same survey from before. So pretty much if you want to learn from my YouTube videos, I've got a couple of questions about what kind of content you want to see. Or if you want to work with me, this is how businesses can get in touch with me. Now onto something that's super interesting for me. So I want to keep expanding this real-time API voice agent. And I've got a couple suggestions here about what I can do as a next video. So something that's probably very interesting to a lot of people is making an outbound AI caller. So basically using the same real-time API agent that we've been building out right now, which is primarily used for inbound calls. So someone calls your number and then the AI agent picks up. We could also trigger this with an outbound call. So for example, let's say my mechanic shop wants to verify someone's coming in for their service that they booked 2 weeks ago. I can give them an outbound call at the day before or an hour before their service and just say, hey, I want to follow up. Are you going to be coming down? As you can imagine, there's probably a lot of use cases here that you might want to do outbound outreach for. If you have a lead gen form and you want to somehow follow up with people pretty much instantly, you can do so with this as well. So pretty much any outbound use case you can think of, you can facilitate with this outbound AI caller demo that I can make out. Or if you want to see more of a comprehensive deep dive into plugging into a CRM, just comment what CRM you want to see below, and then the one that has the most comments, I'm happy to make a video about that too. Now finally, about a week ago, an AI tool, which is called Retail AI, released an integration for the real-time API into their no-code tool. So you can actually use the real-time API without having to code all of this stuff, even though it's available on GitHub. This is obviously a lot to manage. And if you want to expand on this, you can do so by copying the code into AI and then asking it to edit whatever you want it to edit. But it's a bit of work, right? So the Retail platform actually gives you access to the real-time API agent. The only downside is I've seen the documentation here. I've watched a couple of videos. It's a little bit difficult to work with. So if you guys wanted to see this and make it a no code, I'd probably have to get a lot of interest for this to really sink my teeth into the documentation and to be able to build out the full integration end to end, including function calling, including how to send calls from Twilio or different phone providers to basically open up this conversation in the first place. So yeah, if you want to see this, I'm happy to do that. Just want to see a lot of interest before I dive into it. Okay, so with all this out the way, let's get into the Make.com scenario. So this is the Make.com scenario that you would have seen from my previous videos. I'm going to share this in my Gumroad, so you're going to have access to this as well. But the most important thing that I want to discuss first, before I actually go through each module one by one, is to speak about the webhook and how the information has to be structured. So when you're sending your function calls across from your real-time AI agent, that it's actually able to be processed in this Make.com scenario. So I got a very simple visualization here. This is the exact same Make.com scenario that we had in the other page. So it's the exact same thing. And the main thing that we want to look out for is actually the structure of this payload. So right now I've got 3 separate variables in the payload that I'm sending across from my real-time AI agent. And this is the structure that I'm using for all of my function calls. So when I'm actually targeting this for, let's say, route 1, which is get user information, or route 2, which is save user information, or route 3, which is do question and answers using the OpenAI Assistance API, or route 4 for booking a tow. Once again, I know I'm pushing the point a lot, but I'm using the exact same payload. I'm just changing the variables. And this is the payload that we're using over here. So over in Replit, in the actual code for our real-time AI agent, you can see that this is one of the first calls we're making across to the Make.com webhook. And once again, it's got route, it's got data 1 and data 2. And route is always the route that we're taking in Make.com, which is one of these things here, 1, 2, 3, 4. And as you expand it, you'll just put route 5, route 6, route 7. And then we have 2 data points. Now, for my build, it's pretty basic, and all I'm using is 2 other variables over here. You might want to use 3 or 4 for your build if it's a bit more complicated, and that's totally fine as well. So for this specific call, this is where I'm creating the customized first message for my caller. So all I need to do is plug into route 1, which is this route over here, and then I need to send in the caller number. So the caller number is the unique reference per user. It's basically their mobile number. And then over here for data point 2, I've got it as empty because I'm not even using it at all. So if we just go into route number 1 and just quickly go over that payload, if I open up my Google Sheets, you can see over here that we're using data point 1. And from our payload over here, you see data point 1 is just the caller number. So all I'm doing over here in this Google Sheets search rows module is I'm going to my Google Sheets and I'm finding the related fields that match the mobile number from my phone numbers column. And over here, we're in that call history sheet. So I'm going to call history sheet over here. And you can see over here that I have a bunch of previous numbers that I have called with. So these are actually fake numbers. I wouldn't call these if I were you. But you see here, it's the number, which is unique and different to these other numbers. And it holds the person's name, the transcript, and a summary of the conversation. So in that Make.com search row module, I'm actually returning all of this information. And then I'm plugging it into a ChatGPT step. And this ChatGPT step is prompted to create a first message that I'm using so that I can actually give a custom greeting to my customer that's calling me. So I'm not going to go through the actual setup over here because you're going to have access to this in the Gumroad. but the message content that I'm sending are the returned variables from this Google Sheet search over here, which include the customer name and then the summary of their last conversation. And then you have to use a webhook response. So all of the routes over here have a webhook response, and this webhook response is exactly how you get that information back across to your replit. So you can see over here, I'm actually sending the first message variable, which is the result of this ChatGPT step. And then I'm setting some headers, which is content type and application JSON. And this is exactly how that information goes back to my replit, and then I can access it and then give the customer a nice customized and warm greeting. So just to circle back to here, that's all possible because I had the route variable, which I put number 1 here, and that took me up this route over here. And then I had data point 1 as my mobile phone number, and then data point 2 was just empty. And as you can see, in this case, I didn't need data point 2, but in some of these other flows, you might actually need 2 or 3 different variables. Now, if you're wondering, how do I actually send the route specifically to here as opposed to any of these other routes? So that's all done in the filtering over here. So if I open up this filter, you can see that my route, which is from this webhook over here, I've set a filter which if it equals to 1, then I take route 1 over here. But then if I open up this route over here, I've actually set that same filter, so the route variable from the webhook, to equal to 2. So now you see that every time you make a new route, you're basically setting up a filter that filters only for that route. So if it equals to 1, it's here, equals to 2 here, equals to 3 here, and then so on and so forth. So that's the absolute power of this route string over here. So once again, you're just putting your route as 1, 2, 3, or 4, depending on which route you want to take in make.com. And then you're filling up your other variables with the required information based on exactly what process you want to complete. So even though in route 1, we send an empty string over here, it actually doesn't matter at all because we don't need that empty string. And as you recall, I didn't use that empty string in here, or in here, or in here. So it's totally okay to have that empty string just floating around and not being used. So now looking at the other 2 functions that I have in our real-time agent, I've got a function over here, which is question and answer. And then I've got a function over here, which is book tow. So I'm not going to break down how to create these functions. You can see they're pretty much structured in the exact same way. So you can just plug this into AI to duplicate for you. But I am going to focus on the payloads. So over here, we have the question and answer payload that we're sending across to make.com. Again, it's the exact same webhook that we're targeting, which is this webhook here. So the exact same route that we took for number 1 over here, we targeted this webhook. And now we're going to route 3, which is the question and answer. Again, we're just targeting the exact same web. And now our route 3 is defined. Our data point 1 is the question that the customer asked us. And then data point 2 is a thread ID that's needed for our OpenAI Assistance API. So now let's go into the RAG functionality in make.com. So this is the RAG functionality in make.com. This is the 3rd route. So once again, I've got route over here and I've got equals to 3. So I'm only going to let RAG requests come into here. Now I've got this split up into 2 separate sections as well. So the first is for brand new conversations and the second is for existing conversations. The only difference here is that in this Assistance API module, I'm not setting a thread ID variable, which means that when I actually run this, I'm going to create a brand new thread ID. And then I send that thread ID back in the webhook back to my replit real-time agent, which is what you can see happening over here. The thread ID is being sent back and I'm sending it back so that let's say the customer on that same phone call asks me a second and a third and a fourth question. Now, when I go and run a request across to my Assistance API, I feed in this thread ID and then I have the context of the previous questions. So it's a very natural and intuitive approach to actually doing question and answers. And yeah, OpenAI Assistance API makes this process so easy. So in case you're wondering, on the very first question, this thread ID is sent as null. So it's actually an empty string. And over here in this first route, we actually have a filter, which is looking for that data point 2 to see if it contains a snippet, which looks like this, which is thread underscore. So you can see data point 2 is the thread ID. And you're probably already familiar with this, but the thread ID, if I just zoom in, you can see the thread ID variable that we feed into the assistant is thread underscore. So that's why in make.com, we're looking for that thread underscore snippet. And since data point number 2 actually comes in as an empty string for this initial first question, it actually meets this requirement. So it does not contain this. And that's why we just flow down directly into this launch conversation step. And yeah, once again, we don't have a thread ID listed into here. And like I mentioned before, in this webhook, we're basically taking that thread ID that's returned after this API call is made, and we're sending it back to our real-time agent so that for run number 2, once we get that exact same payload, data point 2 now contains the snippet, which is thread underscore, because it meets this requirement and we actually have a thread to plug into our API call. So for this reason, we're able to take this specific route, and then in this API call, we're plugging in data point 2, which once again is the thread ID, directly into the API call, and we can have that continuous conversation. Now in both cases over here, we have a transform to JSON module. And if I open it up, we're basically taking the result from this ChatGPT step and plugging it into here to make sure it's structured in JSON format so that when we plug it into this webhook, it's actually a JSON string. and it doesn't break the API call. So if we just plugged it directly from here into this webhook, it wouldn't have the correct formatting for this API response and would basically break this call, and we wouldn't send anything back to our real-time assistant. So the exact same thing is happening here. If I just open this up, you see we're taking the result from this API call over here. And once again, this is the exact same webhook as what we have over here. We're sending the JSON string and then the thread ID as well. And while we're here, I just want to show you exactly how we parse the response from the webhook and how we access the variable that we need. So just quickly, the structure that we're sending back over here is actually pretty important because this helps us identify exactly how we parse this response. So we're sending it as a JSON payload. And when we're sending it, we're going to have two variables. They're going to be immediately accessible after that function call is made. And in this case, the first variable is called message, and it's the API response from here. And then the thread ID, which is the thread ID again from here. So in this question and answer API call, we're actually sending the API call, and then we're using JSON parse to parse that JSON payload from the make.com webhook. And again, it's the JSON structure over here, and we're sending it as a JSON payload using this header. So we parse that over here, and once we have access to it, we basically save the response from the message variable. So you can see over here, .message, and while we're here, you can also see the .thread. So message and thread are the exact same as message and thread. So you can see it's actually super easy to get the response back because you can create the response of the API call in the exact format that you want to work with. So sometimes when you're making API calls to different software, different tools, the API response is basically set by the software provider. But in this case, for make.com, you set the API response. You can set exactly whatever variables you want back in the exact format. So then when you're duplicating these calls, you can just say to your AI tool and say, hey, I'm going to send a webhook response back that's going to contain the variable hello and then the variable goodbye. And you have to save the responses from them after you complete the function call. So that's what we've done over here. We're basically accessing the webhook response module and saving the variables exactly as we listed them. Now scrolling down a little bit more, we have the book tow function, which once again, it's the exact same structure that we're sending, but now we're changing the route to number 4 over here. And route number 4 is over here. So we're booking a tow. And if I open this up, we can see that we're only letting routes through that have the number 4 listed in the route variable, which is what we have over here. So we're just taking route 4. And then we're accessing some other information, which is the caller number or the mobile number, and then the address. So in this specific process over here, if I open up the Google Sheets, we're booking a tow for the user, and we're actually adding their information across to our Google Sheets, which is here in this book tow sheet. And over here, we're adding the phone number, the address, and then putting a status to pending. And then one of my fictional tow drivers is gonna call this person and then organize a pickup time with them. So one very important thing that I wanna mention is that I have this little quotation mark before I put this data point 1. So from over here, you can see data point 1 includes the caller number, which is this caller number over here. So if I zoom in, you can see that we actually have the plus 614 over here, which is the area code. But the most important thing is that we have the plus over here. Now, if I click on this cell, and you probably can't see it, let me just zoom in. There we go. If I click on the cell, that same little character is listed over here. And that little character is exactly why we can have the plus listed in the cell as well. So if I just backspace that character, now the number has no plus in front of it. And this is a problem because in our other API calls, when we're actually trying to find the user by their phone number, the number that we're getting from Twilio always has the plus in front of it. So every phone number has a plus for the area code. And that's why we need to maintain the plus over here so that when we search up our Google Sheets, we actually have the correct phone number. So as an example, if I now try and search this cell and my number has the plus in front of it, the same number that I get from Twilio that I'm using for all of my searching API calls, I'm actually not going to return this result because it doesn't have a plus here. It has to be like for like the exact same. So once again, that's why we need the plus over here. And that's why whenever we're writing the data, so whenever we're adding a row to a Google Sheets or updating a row, so basically writing more information, we have to include this little single quotation mark. Now on the other side of the fence, when we're actually reading the information, so over here I'm working with a search rows Google Sheets module, you can see that I don't actually include that single quotation here. And that's specifically because, like I mentioned before, the number from Twilio already has that plus in front of it. So when we're searching the number, it's already in that format which has plus 614. But when we're adding the phone number, we have to use this single quotation. So then after we add the row of information to Google Sheets, we're then sending the webhook response. And our webhook response here, and once again, I didn't mention this before, but it's always status 200. So status 200 means it's been a successful API call. And in this case, I send a message variable back with a custom message, which is your tow was successfully booked. One of the drivers will call you shortly to confirm your pickup time. Now this custom message here is exactly what the AI is going to respond back to my customer with. So my fictional AI agent, which is called Sophie in all of my builds, she's going to get this message back from the webhook response, and she's going to basically repeat this back to the customer that requested a tow. So once again, we're using JSON formatting and we're sending the application JSON headers. So back in our function call for booking a tow, After we make that function call, we're then parsing the response again with JSON.parse, and we're accessing that message variable. And that message variable contains that custom message that says, hey, it's been successfully booked. Someone's going to call you in a second. So now our final function call actually is not a function call, but it happens at the end of the conversation. So what we're working with is actually route 2 over here. And route 2 takes the conversation transcript. It then processes it using these ChatGPT modules. It then adds it to a row of our Google Sheet into this call history sheet, so that we can maintain the entire conversation history of all the callers that we had. But just breaking this down very quickly, we're taking route 2 over here, and then we're sending the caller number, again, the unique identifier for this specific session, so the user's mobile phone number, and then the session transcript. So we're capturing the transcript outside of the actual session. So when it hangs up, when the phone call hangs up, and we close our WebSocket and we disconnect from the phone call, we're actually capturing the entire conversation, and then we're processing it, and then we're sending it in this call across to the make.com webhook. So that's why we're taking route 2 over here. And if I filter out route 2, you can see we're using the exact same route variable, and then we're only accepting route 2. And over here, I've got 2 ChatGPT steps to basically process that transcript for me. The first is to take data point number 2, where data point number 2 is the transcript of the entire conversation, and then to find the customer's name. So this is a very basic request, and the output's going to be the customer's name. And this second call over here, again, taking data point number 2, which is the transcript, and then summarizing it into a couple of sentences. And that's what we have over here in this summary column. It's just the transcript, but summarized into 1 or 2 sentences. So when we're actually picking up brand new phone calls and we're searching up these rows against the phone number from the Twilio caller, this is what we're returning in the API call. So we're not taking the actual transcript, because sometimes it can be very, very long. We're just taking that very short summarized transcript, so that when we greet our customer for the first time, we have this very short summarized conversation in 1 or 2 sentences. And that's why it seems very nice and very warm and very welcoming. So that's what we have over here, a short summary. And then over here, we're adding that information into the Google Sheets module. So we're adding it into the caller history tab. And as you already know, data point 1, it contains the phone number, and we're using this single quotation because we're writing the information to the Google Sheets. Then we're sending the result from that first ChatGPT call, which is the username, then the result of data point 2, which is the transcript. And then over here, we're sending the summarized transcript. So once again, it's the phone number, the customer's name, the entire transcript, and the summarized transcript. So we have the phone number, the customer's name, the entire transcript, and a summarized transcript. And as normal, we're sending a webhook response as well. But all we're doing here is we're just sending a status 200 to let the API call know, hey, it's successful, it's been processed. And in this case, we don't actually need an API response. So one cool comment that Dan actually had was that you can integrate a text back service into the real-time agent that basically texts back for missed calls or for short duration calls. Now that's a great idea. And if you wanted to implement that functionality over here, you would just add a Twilio module, and you would take the first name that's generated from this API call, and then the summary of the conversation from this API call, and you would plug it into a Twilio module and plug the customer's phone number in. And once again, we have that phone number because we're already adding it to the Google Sheets. So you would plug it into the Twilio module and you can send it across to the customer. And I reckon that'll be a nice experience to basically pick up your phone and say, hey Bart, thanks again for your call. Here's a quick summary of what we spoke about. If you want to continue this conversation, you can just SMS back. And in this video here, I actually built out Sophie's functionality, and Sophie is the AI caller persona that I created. And I built out the functionality here to also do SMS. So let's say over here, you sent that SMS to the user saying, hey Bart, here's a summary of our conversation. If you want to keep chatting, just feel free to SMS me back here. You could then implement this flow and it would pick up those brand new messages and it would have an ongoing conversation. So you can continue the conversation here. And now you're switching from voice to text incredibly easily. All right, and that's the entire build, guys. So as you saw here, we basically ran through the webhook and the structure of the payload, how it has to be like this. It has to have a route, and then some other variables for the phone number, for the transcript, for the question, whatever other variables you need. And then we looked at all these different modules, and we're specifically just using Google Sheets and ChatGPT here. But again, you can pretty much connect anything to make.com. So if you want a CRM, if you want to plug it into Airtable for a database, if you want to plug it into different messaging services, you have all that capability here from using make.com. So I hope this video is insightful to you guys. I know a lot of people have been asking about the make.com blueprint. Sorry for sending it out so late, but go ahead to my Gumroad and just download it and start using it today. Now, if you're a local business owner and you want to build out some AI receptionist solution for you, be that phone call, email, SMS, whatever other channel that you want, feel free to get in touch with me by either submitting into my form or by sending me an email, and I've left my email in the description of this video. All right, thanks guys, and enjoy your make.com AI automation assistant. See ya.